And we're live, everyone. Hey, how's it going? Glad to see a lot of people already popping in. Interesting show for you tonight, I think. And well, we're going to be getting into some areas where where I feel that there are certain gray areas that we need to kind of delve into a little bit. And one of the things that came up over the last couple of weeks was a discussion some friends and I were having regarding Fama Fraternitatis, or Tatus, or potato, whichever you prefer. And, was it literal history or is it an allegory? Now, I'm of the camp that it's just a symbolic story. It is not literal history, but, people disagree. So what I wanted to do tonight is kind of go over what I think is some pretty good evidence. And I'll even go into my personal belief is that, as you'll see in my presentation shortly, is that it's basically it was a joke to begin with. And I didn't believe that there were, a whole lot of, this secret group that was, in cahoots and all of that. But I have also found some evidence that there actually were members of the RC, and we'll kind of get into that too. So want to say hi to the people popping, and all of my old faves. Jenny, hi, good to see you. Michelle, always a pleasure. Judy, good to see you. Glad that you all could make it. Oh, there's Linda and Michael. Thanks, guys. Glad you're all popping in. I'm glad you are here. And like I was saying, it's one of those things that has been debated, frankly, for centuries, regarding who, this elusive group really was. And again, I hold what's I think is probably a more unpopular view, that it's, was really kind of just a bit of a joke that Francis and Anthony Bacon were having a few laughs with some of their cohorts. And I think that once it was released, it suddenly turned into its own thing. But at any rate, what are your thoughts, folks? Which camp are you in? I posted this question earlier on in the week in Ghosts of Bacon group. A lot of people still think it's literal history. If so, why? I'd love to hear from everyone. So, Jeff, you're here. Tom, good to see you guys. Glad you could make it. All right. So I guess what I'm going to do is go ahead and share this tab. And we're just going to jump into it, gang. And so once we actually start going here, all right. And oops. Yep, that was me messing up. We'll try that again. So, like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and share the tab so I can kind of pop back and forth. I started it on the wrong slide, so I want to get out of that. Started on our beginning here. There we go. So they always refer to themselves as the invisible order of Rosicrucians, and I think I suspect I know why, but I don't know. You guys can be the judge and let me know what you think in the comments. Now, I love this quote by Richard Feynman, a Nobel Prize winning physicist. First principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Now, I really I like this quote simply because what I try to do is guard against confirmation bias. And I had a nice visit with Erin Helton the other day on Facebook. We were kind of going back and forth because she's of the camp that it's a history, and so we were talking about it, and she said something, as Erin does. It was really great. She said, well, it's one of those things where once we start looking for these things, are we going to start seeing that everything is bacon? And I said, yeah, we have to guard against that. Absolutely. And so, I think it's important to, to kind of keep that in mind, to guard ourselves from our own cognitive bias and so on. Hey, Daniel, glad you could make it. Big Jake Roberts. You know that I towered an imposing 5'6", don't you, my friend? I don't know if big is the word. So that's why I started with this quote, because I think it's really important. So one of the things I wanted to remind people, if you are new to this channel, or you're still learning about ciphers and those kinds of things, I really recommend going back to my previous video. It was on 523. You can see here. It's called Bacon Ciphers 101. And I go into some detail explaining simple reverse K ciphers, fourfold, and Elizabethan short ciphered as well. So if you need a refresher, I suggest going back and watching that. If you're one of the people who's watching this video after the fact, I highly recommend watching that first if you're not already familiar with Bacon's work. So this is the cover of the Fama Fraternitatis, tomato, tomato again. So a lot of people don't even know what this is. And what it was a manifesto. And the shortened version of the name was Fama Fraternitatis Rosicrucians. And so when we look at this, what it's really doing is Fama means famous or rumored. And of course, it's the fraternity of the Rosy Cross. So this is where they proclaimed their existence to the world. This one came out in 1614 in Hess Castle, Germany, which is a really interesting location. And in particular, it was the site of the very first observatory in Europe. And so Prince Wilhelm basically was hosting an astronomer and mathematician named Rothman. And he was the royal mathematician. And they set up their first observatory there at his castle. So, like I said, this manifesto kind of announces the presence of the Rosicrucian order and outlined its philosophy and what their principles were. And basically, the author is unknown. Now, there are a lot of usual suspects out there, and the name that's thrown around the most, as you can imagine, is Francis Bacon. So, taking a look at some of the comments here, and yeah, Daniel, I like this because he believes it is both based on historical figure and part allegorical. Yeah, if you want to be a fence sitter, you go right ahead, Daniel. I mean, if that's where you're at. I'm just kidding. Yeah, that is usually what most people believe. This idea that it's based on history, but it's allegorical as well. We're going to jump into that here in a little bit. So good thoughts, gang. So in it, they put out 6 articles of agreement, and this is basically their philosophy. The first is that none of them should profess any other thing than curing the sick, and that gratis. In other words, do it for free. None of their posterity should be constrained to wear one kind of habit, but to follow the custom of the country. I believe this is a part of their identity as a network of spies. I think it was, the Bacon brothers. I think it was Robert Devereux, second Earl of Essex, and a lot of their operatives. And I think that they were kind of passing this around amongst themselves as a bit of a joke. But this would make sense that whatever country they go into, they would put on the types of clothing and the behaviors of the people of that country so that they would go unnoticed. Every year upon day C, they would meet together at the house Sancti Spiritus or write the cause of their absence. Now, a lot's been written. A lot of people have tried to figure out where Sancti Spiritus is, but I believe that day C is actually March 22nd. It would be the first day of spring. And the reason I say this is that C in simple cipher is 3, March, and in reverse is 22. So that would be the 22nd of March, and it's really appropriate that they would meet once a year on the day when for people who believe in the light and knowledge, it makes sense that it would be on the first day of spring or thereabouts. Every brother should seek a worthy person to succeed him after his death. The word CR should be their mark, seal, and character. I'm going to go into an explanation of that in some detail. The fraternity should remain secret for 100 years. Now, it's interesting to note that this was published in 1614, and a couple of other pamphlets were also published between that time in 1616 and 1617. And 100 years later, you see the first Grand Lodge of England of Freemasonry appear in 1717. So it also has a list of names of characters who are in it. CRC is of course the leader. The first one is known as IA. Then we have GV, RC. This is CRC's deceased father's brother's son. A lot of people find that to be a very puzzling thing, but we'll kind of get into that as well. B is a skillful painter with the description. PA was the successor of IO. PD, whose successor was A, and N was in turn A's successor. And R was successor to CRC. And then the last one was GG. So, when it comes to names, these are, well, more than a little enigmatic. Jumping back over here to take a look at a few comments. Tom, what's the old saying about if people tell a story enough, it becomes the truth? If that story gets repeated often enough, it becomes a legend or something like that. I think that's what happened here. And so another good question, would the early Illuminists been a later cousin of the RCs? Yeah, I think that what you have here is a splintering of a tradition, if you will. If you're talking about the Illuminati of 1776, led by Adam Weishaupt, which I believe was just a figurehead name, didn't really. But anyway, just because of the meaning of the name, Adam meaning man or first man, and then you have Weishaupt means wise head. Yeah, a cousin. I guess that would be a good way of saying it. Sure, why not? And right there, Daniel, Hess Castle. I think that once we kind of do a deep dive into that area, there's going to be a whole lot more that we can pull out of there. So, and yeah, Michelle, there's some truths in just about it in all of these different aspects. I agree. So, moving on with our list of names. So currently, what most people believe. CRC stands for Christian Rosicrucians. Now, this name appeared in the alchemical wedding of Christian Rosicrucians, and they state that he was born in 1378. Now, a lot of people don't even believe that the alchemical wedding even goes along with the Fama or the Confessio, which was the second one, and that it was, just something that someone else made up. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But the idea is that CRC learned from the Eastern Magi and wise ones. He became an adept, and then when he returned home to Germany, he started recruiting followers. And one tradition states that they believe that CRC actually had a secret royal lineage, which kind of appeals to my imagination. In his crypt, it follows the dictum of vitriol, which is an alchemical term. However, it stands for this phrase in Latin, which means visit the interior of the earth. By rectification, thou shalt find the hidden stone. And so that is basically, in a nutshell, the enigmatic quality of this publication. And so one of the big things that I think is important to understand here is that the numbers are all symbolic when we're talking about this type of literature. And in their own words, from the Fama itself, they state, "We speak unto you by parables, but would willingly bring you to the right, simple, easy, and ingenuous exposition, understanding, declaration, and knowledge of all secrets. So right here, they're stating explicitly that they are speaking in parables, and therefore it's a symbolic story and not a literal one. And as I said, they're claiming that he was born in the year of 1378. But if we add these numbers together, we have the number 91, which is the simple cipher signature of Anthony Bacon. And if you add them all up, it equals 19, which is the tau in simple cipher. So all of these to me are indications that that year is not intended to be taken literally. So when we consider the Fra Rosicrucian, I talked about this the other night in my teaser last week. The simple value of that is 157. In reverse cipher, it's 168, and K is 287. So these are the numbers that most people are familiar with when it comes to the term Fra Rosicrucian. Interestingly, when you use a fourfold cipher, the number is actually 193, and that's the 44th prime number, which of course is Bacon's secret signature. But interestingly, Fra can also, well, it's also an abbreviation of the name Francis. So that leaves us with Rosicrucian. So what happens when we calculate what each of these are, just Rosicrucian? Well, in simple cipher, the words Rosicrucian is 133. In reverse, it's 117, and in K, it's 211. Now, this happens to be the exact same numbers for King Stuart. Again, 133 in simple, 117 in reverse, and 211 in K. So what really got me interested in this was just the cover, the frontispiece of what's called the Fama Fraternitatis Rosicrucians. And so the first thing you notice, I'm just going to go ahead and put this out here. All of you people watching live, what do you notice looking at this? If you can kind of really look at it closely, do you see anything that seems to kind of strike you as being either an error or something that doesn't appear the way it's supposed to? I'll give you a second to kind of look at it. Anything appear odd about the way it appears? Yeah. First and foremost, you can see that there are different fonts being used, different typefaces. And the other thing too, again, right on cue, and the spacing. It is weird about the spacing, isn't it? And if you look at it, and yeah, definitely the writing. I mean, it's part in Latin, it's part in German, but in particular, there it is. Why did they split the title? Well, now that's exactly what I was wondering, Jenny. And so, if you remember, I just said that Fra is an abbreviation of Francis. And so, if we take a look at this Fra, and all of a sudden it's hyphenated, why did they break this word in half? Why there? It makes no sense. Especially if you're planning out the frontispiece or the cover of a book, there's plenty of space. If you wanted to center Fama here, you could have put these 3 letters down here in a smaller typeface along this. There's plenty of room there. So why abbreviate it in this way? Well, I decided to go ahead and calculate the values here of these different pieces. So looking at Fama Fra as if it's 1 unit, and then the rest of it, Ternitatis, as if it's another completely separate word, and see what we come up with here using our simple reverse and case ciphers. Because as soon as you see something like that, it stands out. You say, well, that makes no logical sense of why would they put it on that cover like that? Well, it means something. Okay, so if we look this close up here, you can see very easily how you could have fit everything in there quite well. So let's look at Fama Fra. In simple, the value totals 44, which again is Rex in simple cipher and Bacon's secret signature. Reverse total is 131, and case cipher is 174. When we look at these totals, like I just said, 44 being Bacon's secret signature, it's Rex and simple. The reverse value of 131 is actually F.R. Stewart III in reverse cipher. And the case cipher total is King Francois Stewart III in simple. Now, those of you who have been following my work understand why those names are significant and why those values therefore start suddenly carry meaning. So it's almost as if this famous or this rumored fraternity is actually announcing who Sir Francis Bacon's real identity truly is. If we look at our fourfold cipher signature of it, and you add up these letters, FF equals 30, AAA equals 49, M and R and so on, it totals 108. And so we know that that is Francis in reverse cipher. So, not conclusive, but interesting. And so what I wanted to do is whenever I see something like this, gang, I don't automatically think that, oh, it's all Francis. No, I need more confirmation than this because while this is interesting, it really is, just one indication. And once we start really looking at these kinds of things in detail, suddenly we start to see a picture appear. Going back to some of our comments, here we have, yes, fonts and spacing anomalies are also found in the first folio. Have it sitting on the shelf right behind me. It is full of them, and there are far more messages there than what I would be able to go into in any given time. Some of these comments are really pretty funny. Yeah, Jenny, that definitely would have made a lot more sense, like we said, for sure. Now, when we start looking, oh, here's a great one. Thanks, Tom. With everything people like Bacon had going on, why would they expend this type of energy? It's such a good question. And I think that should be one of the biggest questions, that we really kind of delve into here, because it would have to be really, really important, wouldn't it? And if there was a piece of information such as Bacon's true identity, who he really was, who his birth parents were, that he did not want it to be lost to history, I think that he and Anthony would have spent a lot of time and energy putting that information out there. So I personally think that's the answer. But great question, Tom. Yeah. Daniel Spino, it's my belief that a Rosicrucian vault was replicated on Oak Island, and our man Bacon is buried there. Well, hopefully this next season we'll find out. And so I'm not going to disagree with you. Also 108 is Francois III in simple cipher. Just wanted to throw that in there. So let's look at the second half, Trinitatis. And so our sums end up being here for simple 129, reverse is 121, and K is 233. And, looking at it at first, 129, it wasn't anything, but then I realized it was I, King Francois, in simple cipher. He does that with a couple of examples. He always adds the word I in front of it, especially when it's simple. Reverse value is Wa Francois in simple cipher. And K amount of 233 is FL Waf Angelema in reverse, and King Francis Stewart III in simple. All different forms of his name. The fourfold value of Trinitatis is Wa Francois in reverse of 154 and FR the third in case cipher. So we have hits on all four ciphers once again because of this letter arrangement. Anything different would not have produced any of these results. So like I said earlier, this is interesting. but I don't feel that this is enough to go on and say, wow, this tells us, who wrote this thing. Um, but can you see any other discrepancies, gang? And let me just direct your attention down to the bottom of that page. Any thoughts? Yeah, there it is. We have a date at the bottom, don't we? Here's the strange thing. When you look at it closely, you're going to notice that it's interrupted by periods. That's not a conventional way to list a date in Roman numerals. So just like the separation of FRA, um, it's the date at the bottom. And why is it separated by periods? So when we see this as being an anomaly, something that normally on most documents, you do not see that during the Renaissance. But here we have a period after each of these little sections and it's broken up. So here we go again. And so suddenly here at the bottom of the page, we have a possible signature with the simple cipher of 70, a reverse of 80, and K of 148. None of these seem to be obvious cipher signatures. But in simple, 70 is actually Dauphin, apparently in simple instead of simple there. You see my typo. So in simple cipher, Dauphin is the value of 70, and it's also Rex in K cipher, king. The reverse value of 80 is actually the value of the letters FR, the third in fourfold cipher. And it's also coincidentally James in reverse cipher. The K value of 148, Wa Francois the third in simple cipher. So again, is this circumstantial evidence? Yeah, I think so. But once we start looking at more stuff, maybe we can come to some more solid conclusions. The other thing too is there a possibility that by looking at all of the possible names that Francis Bacon should have had, and the ways that he had signed his papers, whether it was with an FR, an FRA, or just an F period, and all of the different variations of what his name really would have been, of Stuart with the French spelling or the English spelling, for example, that by creating such a saturation of numbers, does it increase the odds that you're going to get a hit? I would say yes, in theory. However, so many of these signatures actually overlap. For example, 133, 167, 321, 0231. These are all numbers that repeat amongst different variations of the name. So the answer there is yes and no. So again, I just want to kind of keep things in context for us here. So the actual text from it, one of the things they said was the word CR should be their mark, seal, and character. Now, I don't know about you, but I didn't know that the letters CR were a word. However, we do know that they did leave their marks or their seals, particularly those seals that were lead seals that were found on Oak Island recently, as well as characters or letters. So how is this a word? And how do they use it as their mark, seal, and character? Well, CR is 3 and 17, or we could just look at it as 317 from the simple cipher values of those letters. That is actually the value of Valois Angoulême in K cipher, 317. If we look at the reverse cipher values of C is 22 and R is 8, we have the number 228. And that's the value of Francis Valois Angoulême in simple cipher. It's also the value of King Francois III in reverse cipher. And it is King F III in K cipher. And so if that wasn't enough, also 22 is also the Tav in Hebrew alphabet. 8 is an H, which we know is also a double tau. So this also gives us a triple tau symbol of 228. Additionally, X And H, remember, we have the substitution system between simple and reverse ciphers. And so when we consider this idea, X and H can actually be replacements for and substitutes for C and R. And if you remember my work a while back with our good friend Nicholas Hilliard, this was the signature or the mark he left on the portrait he painted of his wife, where it has an N and the H. Well, here's the thing. He also included an N the opposite way, which is actually an X. So XH, this is a CR. So we know that Nicholas Hilliard, the person we know as Nicholas Hilliard, or the pseudonym or alias of Nicholas Hilliard, used the CR as his mark here. Pretty cool. So before I continue looking at, let's see. Oh, a little bombshell from Chris Dona. Glad you could make it, my friend. 317 degrees from the stone triangle to the approximate center of Nolan's cross, too. Yeah, this is a very important number, for sure. For sure. So I'll just kind of keep on going here, gang. Now, this guy, Johann Valentin Andrea, he referred to the Rosicrucian as fictitious, and he called it a ludibrium. This word means plaything or trivial game. Now, when you consider that the alchemical wedding was attributed to be written by him, or he claimed he did, that he wrote it, and now here he is calling it a trivial plaything or a trivial game. We also have the words arose, are 55 in simple. 55 is the short cipher value of Francis Bacon. 70 in reverse, and 70, of course, is Dauphin. So these both refer or correlate to Francis. So another thing, too, I suspect that maybe he was communicating some secret successions of Europe. In other words, the names of people who were not allowed their birthright, just like himself. And I think that he encoded some of this information in the Fama. So what I decided to do is try to see if I could find who these other characters could be. So here's some of the identities of the characters who are listed within the Fama. I've identified CRC as Francis Bacon. Now, people don't like that because they believe that he was born in 1378, but again, that is just a symbol. It's untrue. When we look at CRC in fourfold cipher, the total ends up being 44. CC is 27 in fourfold, and R is 17. You add that together, you get 44. The C can equal 100, which is Francis Bacon in simple cipher. And then if we substitute with our at-bash system, X for C, the RX is a phonetic Rex. Francis Bacon is Rex. He's king. Also, Father, CRC, can be an acronym based upon this by substituting an R for the H and rearranging it. We have Frater, Francis Bacon, it's Rex. As I mentioned before, CR having the value of 228 with Francois Valois Angoulême, plus one more C, which is 3. So we have Francois Valois Angoulême the third. And that's why I fully believe that CRC is intended to represent Francis Bacon. IA, well, I is 9, A is 1 in simple, 91 is Anthony in simple cipher. The very next name right after CRC. Another way of looking at it too, I usually don't like doing this, but in this case, it's far beyond a coincidence, where we have I being 9 in simple cipher, but A being having the value of 24 in reverse. Add them together and we have 33 Bacon. So IA spells out Anthony Bacon. So a lot of people think that Johann Valentin Andrea is IA. However, if we take the values in simple reverse and case ciphers of Valentin, and then we subtract the values from Johann, the answer is 33 in simple, 17 in reverse, and 33 in K as well. So I just think that that's really pretty interesting to have it say bacon, R bacon. And also 1 7 A, and then 7 is G, which we know can be a bacon cipher, bacon signature. So 17 could represent Anthony Bacon as well. Now RC. With RC, this is interesting. They had this description of him: CRC's deceased father's brother's son. And when you look this up on online, and there's a statement that says the reference has always been an enigmatic one for researchers. So if I'm right, as I contend that CRC is actually Francis Bacon, his deceased father is Francis II. His younger brother was Charles IX, who actually eventually ended up on the throne. He had a bastard son, Charles de Valois, the Duke of Angoulême. RC is also 173, like we said earlier, but it's also the value of the name King Charles in reverse cipher. Probably just a coincidence. RC could also stand for Roi Charles. Here he was the bastard son, and he's being denied his birthright. Popping back out to take a look at some of the comments. Yep. Just exactly like that. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love this. Sounds like an older day geocaching work page. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I don't know, gang. So far, what are your thoughts? Any questions or comments? I have a little bit more, and we can kind of dive in a little bit deeper here. But I don't want to take up your whole evening here. All right. So here are some of my conclusions, along with some possibilities that, again, I don't have hard evidence for some of this stuff, but I find these connections to be very interesting. Um, in my conclusion, I believe that Anthony and Francis were the ones responsible for the Fama's publication. I do not believe it's a literal history in any way. I think that where it documents his travels, it's actually referring to how Bacon had traveled around the continent when he was a teenager. And since Johann Andrea calls it a ludibrium, again, this in my mind tells me that it started out as a joke. And and I think it may have all of a sudden been leaked out and got into some people's hands. Uh, this is my speculation of a possibility. What if if there are members, if there really were members of the RC, the Rosicrucians, what if they were a group of royal cousins? In other words, Charles de Valois. We have Francis Bacon. They would have been cousins. You have Robert Devereux, who was the son of Queen Elizabeth. He would have been a royal cousin who was denied his birthright. So maybe they were just trying to, get kind of secretly get the word out to people who knew how to read his ciphers. And so what if it was just a list of people who had been kept from their actual birthright? So one thing's for sure, I believe that right there on the cover, because of the details that I've just explained here this evening, I think it announces Francis's truth, that who he really was, who his parents truly were. So I don't know, people. What are your thoughts? I mean, I still want to, kind of get into this, and let's see. Um, yeah, Awoken One. Shakespeare's entire works could be coded with endless amount of messages that still have yet to be deciphered. You know, that's what Ignatius Donnelly believed back at the turn of the 20th century. And a lot of researchers have concluded the same thing. I believe the same thing. I'm still working with just the ideas I found from the plaque. And I've been working on that for over a year and a half now. And so, if there's that much information just from just from that, I can only imagine once I really kind of dig into um, the first folio, what's going to be there. So besides the first folio and Fama, are there other works that use these coding techniques? Um, yeah, there are actually, and believe it or not, I know of at least three of them are actually maps, examples of cartography. I found a map that actually details and lists all of the locations that are talked about in the Fama Fraternitatis, and they're actually labeled on the map. So I'm still kind of digging into that, but yeah, great question. Um, on Fuego, once again, Tom. So was it a fictional group formed to pass along a message, or a group formed to ensure a message not get passed along, or ensure a message got passed along? Yeah, yeah, I think it is. And so I think the whole purpose was, I mean, if it really was a actual group with members, and it wasn't just something that Anthony and Francis were passing around to their friends, as saying, "Hey, psst, guess what? Here's who I am." Um, uh, I think that that's exactly what they wanted to do, was to kind of preserve that information, for sure. Another good question. So, going by your explanation, where would you put the Invisible College? Well, once again, it's the Invisible College. I believe was the Republic Without Borders. I think that the Invisible College was basically just a loose network of people, scientists, astronomers, theologians, philosophers, who were sharing their information and discoveries with each other. Um, and I think this is just one of the ways that they did that. Uh, I don't know if you were there for my presentation on the Invisible College image, but it is really pretty interesting. Any link in your research with Bacon being supposedly Saint Germain? I have not found any links there yet, and believe me, I'm well aware of that theory. Some people believe that Saint Germain was CRC, and therefore people also think he was Bacon. As the man, Saint Germain was known as the man who did not die. People who had met him when they were quite young met him in old age, and when they were in their 80s, and couldn't believe he looked exactly the same as he did when they were young. I mean, those are actually documented stories. So I haven't found anything there yet. No. Um, I'll just let that one speak for itself, Chris. Good work. Um, yeah, Jenny. Definitely the first folio, and like I said, it appears in a couple of maps. It's really kind of cool. Yeah, Daniel, I think that we could probably connect the dots here, of basically the Rosicrucians and Invisible College, and then all of a sudden the development of the Royal Society within the next century. I think that there's probably um, a, a definite dot connect. We could connect dots there for sure. Um, and I like these two. What maps? Are you kidding? Nope, I'm not. Uh, in fact, one of them It's actually a very famous map. It goes along with uh, my Oak Island theory, and the one that I proposed. And once once I'm in the clear, I'm going to go ahead and go through that in some very minute detail here in one of these presentations. Um, there's another map that actually has it's covered from one end to the other with Bacon signatures, and it actually depicts the circumnavigation of the world by Sir Francis Drake. Yes. All right. Cool. Yeah, Jenny. Basically, you miss one. That's kind of what happened with my I work with uh, the plaque of Shakespeare's funerary monument. There were multiple versions of the same message encoded within the different algorithms that the cipher creates. And so, if someone only unraveled one, they would still be getting the information that he was encoding in there. Yeah. So, and they definitely did it in more ways than just that. They recorded it in multiple different forms in different places. And here's a bombshell. I didn't know this, Daniel. Saint Germain supposedly died in Hess Castle. Interesting. Francis Bacon was called the Hercules of philosophy. There's a Hercules monument in Hess Castle with a fountain that flows directly to where Wilhelm's palace once was, where the observatory was, all in a straight line. Could be something there. So let's see. Oh, Linda, thank you. I'm glad you could pop in, even if you got to go. Yeah, definitely your wheelhouse there, Chris. Royal Society was definitely filled with the Rosicrucians, Edmund Halley, Sir Isaac Newton, Sir Christopher Wren, etc. Yeah, if we could actually link their names specifically to the RC, either in their own documents or in some other way, I think that that would be really kind of cool if we could tie them in and find out if there really was uh, a secret society called the Rosicrucians, or if it was just, like I said, it started out as a joke. Daniel, when you do, Robert Boyle, there's the famous portrait that was painted of him. Well, I highly recommend taking a close look at his hand in that portrait. His hand actually spells out his formula for pressure of gases. That's what he was famous for. So if you look at that portrait, and you will be able to see the actual formula being kind of encoded in his hand position. It's really kind of cool. Jenny, this is where some newly created constellations come in during the 16th and 17th century. Like I said, anyone wants to know astronomy, ask Chris. So, all right, everyone. So I don't know. What are your thoughts about the RC here? There's most of what's out there is all speculation. Some of what I presented this evening, I know, was, in my opinion, speculation. Other parts of it are just, cipher work, and it's right there for us to see when all of a sudden you start looking at it. You can actually see it. So, oh, there we go. Here's a question for you, Chris. Did they name these constellations to provide a message? Well, if you're asking Chris and I, we say yes, but I don't know. Do you have something to add to that, Chris? So, besides identities, were there any esoteric truths and teachings encoded as well? Um, Yes and no. I think that one of the main things that I found were just clues of how to read the ciphers. Honestly, so in that sense, it was esoteric knowledge for sure. Um, but as far as things like um, the ideas of alchemy, for example, that's one of the questions I get a lot. Um, you know, I'm once again, I'm one of those people in it, that hold an unpopular view when it comes to alchemy. Um, I think this is the philosopher's stone right here, and you take base gray matter, and once you enrich it through the crucible of learning and studying science and observing nature, uh, that you can turn it into gold, which is knowledge and enlightenment. Um, so, the whole lead to gold thing, I think it's all a metaphor. Let's pull this one up. Michael, given that Rosicrucianism is Germanic in origin, do you think that a lot of their works, traditions, and scripture were destroyed by the clampdown of the fraternal orders in World War II Germany? Well, that's a distinct possibility. But what I think, even though this was first published in Germany, I think it was, a group of British or English spies that were doing it in German. So they were wearing the habit of that country, right? And so they were publishing in that country as Germans. So I think it was more of a cosmopolitan sort of organization as opposed to coming from any one specific country in that sense. Okay, Chris posted. Oops. There we go. As far as constellations, did they encode it? Yes, I think they did. It would be a lengthy response here, that's for sure. Um, and yes, symbolically, there were truths. Um, so the emerald stone is an illusion. Are you talking about the emerald tablet of Thoth or Hermes? Trismegistus? Is that? I'm not really sure which one you're referring to there. Longer answer for Chris from Chris. Tom, I found constellations placed during that time that have hidden meanings or double meanings. One in particular points to another meaningful constellation. Very cool. Oh, this is interesting. I didn't know this. Again, Daniel always loves to post these things. I've never heard this. Is so cool. There was a law that said it was illegal to replicate gold. Boyle sought to abolish that law. Interesting. Yes, this is also true. Chris, there are numerous constellations that aligned with teachings alchemically and otherwise, including the ancients. Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of neat that we've finished tonight on an astronomical note because um, the astronomer that I mentioned earlier, Rothman, also teamed up with Tycho Brahe, and there is a map of the island of Ven, spelled Hven, which is heaven. Um, and it has a bunch of bacon ciphers on it. That's kind of cool. So, want to know what their connection is, and it's going to be one of those things that we have to dig into, I think, in the future. So, yeah, alchemy was huge back then. I am in the camp that great effort was made to make a philosopher's stone. If anyone could do it, I would say Bacon had the best chance. Hey, if that were possible, considering what I've seen of his accomplishments, I'd agree with you there. If anyone had a chance of doing such a thing, it would be him. Agreed. All right, great stuff, gang. Any questions or observations? And by the way, whenever I do this, I always open it up. If you saw any kind of chink in my armor here, or a hole in the theory that I presented, or the information, miscalculation, something like that, please bring it to my attention. It can only those kinds of criticisms. I really welcome them, and they can only make us better. Um, oh yeah, once again, another truth. Uh, there were so many things that had to be hidden. And it wasn't just the Catholic Church. You have to remember that James the First, the Protestant, really uh, did a lot to try to clamp down on witchcraft. So uh, really pretty interesting. Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Any other questions, comments before for the good of the order here? All right, my people, we're coming up here on the end of the hour, so going to wrap things up. Again, I want to say thanks for popping in, especially all of our usual suspects. You guys are great. Love the comments, love the questions, love the additions to the conversation. Uh, really, really great stuff here. So, oh, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. All right, gang. Again, something to think about. Like I said, we'll continue this discussion in our Facebook group, Ghosts of Bacon. All right. One last tidbit, teaser. Some believe that a philosopher's stone was made and hidden somewhere where their order could be revived if necessary. Guess where? Well, we know one theory. Well, maybe if we find that tomb on that mysterious island in the North Atlantic, we'll find out more. All right, people. Thanks so much. Appreciate your time. Have a good night, and I'll see you next time. Oh, and have a great 4th of July celebrating the birthday of our great nation. Play it safe and enjoy. Bye, gang.